I'm Phil DeLuna, and I'm running to be the next Member of Parliament for Toronto St. Paul's. Today I'm going to talk about my Filipino-Canadian heritage, what it was like growing up as an immigrant to this country, and why I think it's time to have more Filipino-Canadians as elected officials in Parliament. So today I'm at Witchwood Barnes Park, which is a community center here in Toronto St. Paul's. The building behind me used to be a converted old streetcar facility that they've now turned into a community center. They host many events here, including a farmer's market on the weekend. It's also a place where there's lots of community engagement, a lot of artist communities spend their time here at Witchwood Barnes. And it's a really great meeting place for the community. Today I'm giving an interview with Omni Television, which is a Filipino news channel. And I'm going to be talking a little bit more about my candidacy and why I chose to run. So I'm here today with Teresa. Teresa is a reporter for Omni Television, which is a relatively new Filipino news station. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
We hope to bring out the stories that matter to Filipino-Canadians.
Yeah.
It's just that there's so many of us here, especially COVID times. Many of our frontliners are from the Philippines.
That's right.
And, it's really important to me personally.
And I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity for the interview today.
Of course, I'm really excited to learn more about it, It's great that we have Filipino-Canadians here making a difference.
My message is participate in democracy, be a part of the system, volunteer if you can, reach out to people, because the Filipino-Canadian community in Canada needs to have their voice heard, and the only way to do that is if you start speaking up.
Teresa Redula, Omni News, Toronto.
My interview with Omni Filipino was my first media coverage as a political candidate. And it actually meant a lot to me that it was a local ethnic media that covered my run. It's interesting because politics in Filipino culture is a dirty word. A lot of the politicians in the Philippines are seen as corrupt or power hungry. And even my own parents, when I first told them that I wanted to run for office or that I was taking this step, they were very concerned. Why would you do this? Why would you throw away your scientific career to run for politics? Don't you know that all politicians are corrupt? And of course, I had to explain to them that in Canada, at least, a lot of what politics is about is making policies and serving constituents and trying to make a big difference to the communities that we serve. Despite politics being a dirty word, the pandemic has shown me increasingly that we need good politicians and we need good government in order to address the big, massive problems and challenges that we face. It took a while to kind of explain to my parents why I want to do this, how I want to lower the barriers of entry, especially for non-traditional candidates, like scientists, like young people, like Filipino-Canadians. Filipino-Canadians are the fourth largest visible minority in this country. And yet we've only ever had one Member of Parliament in the entire history of the Canadian Federation. I look at other visible minorities or immigrant groups across Canada, and I think about how others have become much more politically engaged, like the Sikh community, for example, or the Black community as another, with organizations like Operation Black Vote Canada, which help to rally around political engagement. Unfortunately, I think the Filipino-Canadian community is not quite there just yet, although that is changing. I'm starting to see a whole new generation of Filipino-Canadians who recognize that there is a place for Filipinos in the decision-making tables of this country. I want to take a step back and reflect a little bit on what it was like to grow up as a Filipino-Canadian. I've written about this in Toronto Star, and the first line of that op-ed was, "When I was young, all I wanted to be when I grew up is white." Needless to say, I've had a very complex relationship with my identity as a Filipino-Canadian. The reason being is I moved to Canada when I was 5 years old. I grew up in Windsor, Ontario. My dad was an auto worker. My mom worked in customer service. Windsor is a primarily white city, and I was one of the only Filipino kids growing up in my class. I just wanted to fit in. I just wanted to belong like everyone else. I would come to school with adobo chicken on rice, and all the other kids would come with peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And I'm ashamed to say, but back then, I felt ashamed to be Filipino. I was ashamed of my cultural heritage because I just wanted to fit in with everyone else. Only throughout my adulthood, as I've grown up, have I come to realize that many important parts of who I am, like my hard work ethic, my value system, and my respect for elders and family, are precisely because of my Filipino heritage and upbringing. One of the pillars in my campaign is supporting essential workers. This is important to me for a few reasons. One, my fiance is a nurse at Sick Kids Hospital. She has been at the front lines of this pandemic for this past year. Second, many Filipino-Canadians occupy these low-paying but essential roles in caregiving, in nursing, in healthcare, at meatpacking plants, and at fulfillment centers, as custodians, and in other low-paying customer service roles. These are the people who have allowed many Canadians to stay home safe this past year. They are at the front lines working to provide for their families and provide for their communities. I've come to appreciate in my adulthood the sacrifices that my parents made to bring me to this country, to allow me and my little sister the opportunity to have a better life, one that would not have been afforded to me if I grew up in the Philippines. I honor and respect that sacrifice every day, and it's part of why I work so hard. But I also recognize that for my parents, taking risk and doing something like running for office is unnecessary. For them, stability is the ultimate goal. For them, owning a home and having a stable job is success. Why would anyone want anything more? There are almost 1 million Filipino-Canadians in this country. And the Filipino-Canadian population is increasing, as it consistently is one of the largest, if not the largest, immigration share population in this country every year. They come here to work as nannies, as essential workers, as caregivers, as nurses, in factory work, and on the fields in agriculture. They're often marginalized and often don't have the support structures, the networks, or the knowledge to be truly successful in this country. I'm running because I want to be a voice for this community. I'm running to inspire other young Filipino-Canadians, another generation who want to be politically involved, who want to be engaged, and who want to have a hand in shaping the future of this country. As I grow up, I continue to think about my Filipino-Canadian heritage. I continue to have a complex relationship with my identity, and that continues to evolve and change. Throughout recent years, throughout the success that I've had before I started running for office, as a scientist and as a clean tech innovator, I've had other young Filipino-Canadians come to me and say that they were inspired and that I'm doing a great job to represent the community. To be honest, I've never really considered myself as a Filipino-Canadian. I'm only a Canadian. I never really thought of my racial identity as a large part of my personality or a focal point into who I am. Until recently, until I realized how important it is that Filipino-Canadians have examples and mentors. It's very difficult to believe that you can do something if you've never seen anyone that looks like you do it before. And I hope that even just by running, I can be an example to other Filipino-Canadians, regardless of party, to consider running and becoming more politically engaged. To realize that politics, especially in Canada, is not a dirty word, but rather a calling and a civic duty. That participating in democracy is important, and that the only way that we can have our voices heard, that 1 million Canadians can have their voices heard, is by participating, getting involved politically, voting, or running for office.